What's up, y'all? We're gonna read Ramona. Again, I've seen that video. I was trying to read this chapter with my child, but she didn't let me this weekend. So if anybody's been waiting for me to read this chapter, I apologize. I was with my child. Chapter 16. After they reached the highway and had trotted briskly on for a mile, Alessandro suddenly put out his hand and, taking Baba by the rein, began turning him around and around in the road. After they reached the highway. "We will not go any further in the road," he said, "but I must conceal our tracks here. We will go backwards for a few paces." The obedient Baba backed slowly, half dancing as if he understood the trick. The Indian pony, too, curvetted awkwardly, then by a sudden bound under Alessandro's skillful guidance, leaped over a rock to the right and stood waiting further orders. Baba followed and captained, and there was no trail to show where they had left the road. After trotting the pony round and round again in ever-widening circles, cantering off in one direction after another, then backing over the tracks for a few moments, Ramona docilely following, calmly. Though much bewildered as to what it all meant, Alessandro said, "I think now they will never discover where we left the road. They will ride along, seeing our tracks plain, and then they will be so sure that we would have kept straight on, that they will not notice for a time, and when they do, they will never be able to see where the trail ended. And now my Mahela has a very hard ride before her. Will she be afraid?" It's kind of smart, but he thinks that no way the Senora will just let Ramona go, you know? So, "Afraid," laughed Ramona. "Afraid on Baba and with you?" But it was indeed a hard ride. Alessandro had decided to hide for the day in a cañon he knew, from which a narrow trail led direct to Temecula, a trail which was known to none but the Indians. Once in this cañon, they would be safe from all possible pursuit. Alessandro did not in the least share Ramona's confidence that no effort would be made to overtake them. To his mind, it appeared certain that the Senora would never accept the situation without making an attempt to recover at least the horse and the dog. "She can say, if she chooses, that I have stolen one of her horses," he thought to himself bitterly. "And everybody would believe her. Nobody would believe us if we said it was the Senorita's own horse." The head of the cañon was only a couple of miles from the road, but it was in a nearly impenetrable thicket of chaparral, where young oaks had grown up so high that their tops made, as it were, a second stratum of thicket. Alessandro had never ridden through it. He had come up on foot once from the other side, and forcing his way through the tangle, had found to his surprise that he was near the highway. It was from this cañon that he had brought the ferns which it had so delighted Ramona to arrange for the decoration of the chapel. The place was filled with them, growing almost in tropical luxuriance, but this was a mile or so farther down, and to reach that spot from above, Alessandro had had to let himself down a sheer wall of stone. The cañon at its head was little more than a rift in the rocks, and the stream which had its rise in it was only a trickling spring at the beginning. It was its precious water, as well as the inaccessibility of the spot, which had decided Alessandro to gain the place at all hazards and costs. But a wall of granite would not have seemed a much more insuperable obstacle than did this wall of chaparral, along which they rode, vainly searching for a break in it. It appeared to Alessandro to have thickened and knit, even since the last spring. At last they made their way down a small side cañon, a sort of wing to the main cañon, a very few rods down this, and they were as hidden from view from above as if the earth had swallowed them. The first red tints of the dawn were coming from the eastern horizon on the zenith. The whole sky was like a dappled crimson fleece. "Oh, what a lovely place!" exclaimed Ramona. "I am sure this was not a hard ride at all, Alessandro. Is this where we are to stay?" Alessandro turned a compassionate look upon her. "How little does the wood dove know of rough places," he said. "This is only the beginning. Hardly is it even the beginning." Fastening his pony to a bush, he reconnoitered the place, disappearing from sight the moment he entered the chaparral in any direction. Returning at last with a grave face, he said, "Will Mahela let me leave her here for a little time? There is a way, but I can find it only on foot. I will not be long. I will not be gone long. I know it is neat. Oh no, I know it is near." Sorry guys, I'm messing up. So he's gonna. They got to the place where he's setting her up, but I guess he's gonna scope out the surrounding areas. Tears came into Ramona's eyes. The only thing she dreaded was the losing sight of Alessandro. He gazed at her anxiously. "I must go, Mahela," he said with emphasis. "We are in danger here." "Go, go, Alessandro," she cried, "but oh, do not be long. I wonder why he told her they were in danger. As he disappeared in the thicket, the tough boughs, B-O-U-G-S, no, B-O-U-G-H-S. You heard that a couple times, the bows? As he disappeared in the thicket, the tough boughs crackling and snapping before him, it seemed to Ramona that she was again alone in the world. Captain, too, bounded after Alessandro and did not return at her call. All was still. Ramona laid her head on Baba's neck. The moments seemed hours at last. Just as the yellow light streamed across the sky and the crimson fleeces turned in 1 second to gold, she heard Alessandro's steps. The next moment saw his face. It was aglow with joy. I have found the trail, he exclaimed, but we must climb up again out of this, and it is too light. I like it not. With fear and trembling, they urged their horses up and out into the open again. So he found the trail. With fear and trembling, they urged their horses up and out into the open again and galloped a half-mile farther west, still keeping as close to the chaparral thicket as possible. Here, Alessandro, who led the way, suddenly turned into the very thicket itself, no apparent opening, but the boughs parted and closed, and his head appeared above them. Still, the little pony was trotting bravely along. Baba snorted with displeasure as he plunged into the same bristling pathway. The thick-set, thorny branches smote Ramona's cheeks. What was worse, they caught the nets swung on Baba's sides. Presently, these were held fast, and Baba began to rear and kick. It was a real difficulty. Alessandro dismounted, cut the strings, and put both the packages securely on the back of his own pony. I will walk, he said. It was only a little way longer I would have ridden. I shall lead Baba where it is narrow. Narrow, indeed, it was from the sheer terror soon that Ramona shut her eyes. A path, it seemed to her, only a hand's breadth wide, a stony, crumbling path on the side of a precipice down which the stones rolled and rolled and rolled, echoing far out of sight as they passed. At each step the beast took, the stones rolled and fell. Only the yucca plants, with the sharp bayonet leaves, had made shift to keep foothold on this precipice. Of these there were thousands, and their tall flower stalks, 15, 20 feet high, set thick with the shining smooth seed cups, glistened like satin chalices in the sun. Below, hundreds of feet below, lay the cañon bottom, a solid bed of chaparral looking soft and even as a bed of moss. Giant sycamore trees lifted their heads at intervals above this, and far out in the plain glistened the loops of the river whose sources, unknown to the world, seen of but few human eyes, were to be waters of comfort to these fugitives this day. Alessandro was cheered. The trail was child's play to him. At the first tread of Baba's dainty steps on the rolling stones, he saw that the horse was as sure-footed as an Indian pony. In a few short hours now, they would be all at rest. He knew where, under a sycamore clump, there was running water, clear as crystal and cold, almost colder than one could drink. And green grass, too, plenty for a day's feed for the horses, or even 3, and all California might be searched over in vain for them. Once they were down this trail, his heart full of joy at these thoughts, he turned to see Ramona pallid, her lips parted, her eyes full of terror. He had forgotten that her riding had hitherto been only on the smooth ways of the valley and the plain. There she was, so fearless that he had no misgiving about her nerves here. But she had dropped the reins, was clutching Baba's mane with both hands and sitting unsteadily in her saddle. She had been too proud to cry out, but she was nearly beside herself with fright. Alessandro halted so suddenly that Baba, whose nose was nearly on his shoulder, came to so sharp a stop that Ramona uttered a cry. She thought he had lost his footing. Alessandro looked at her in dismay. To dismount on that perilous trail was impossible. Moreover, to walk there would take more nerve than to ride. Yet she looked as if she could not much longer keep her seat. "Carita," he cried, "I was stupid not to have told you how narrow the way is, but it is safe. I can run in it. I ran all this way with the ferns on my back I brought for you." Oh, she thinks it might be too loose. It might slip. "Oh, did you?" gasped Ramona, diverted for the moment from her contemplation of the abyss and more reassured by that change of her thoughts than she could have been by anything else. "Did you? It is frightful, Alessandro. I never heard of such a trail. I feel as if I were on a rope in the air. If I could get down and go on my hands and knees, I think I would like it better. Could I?" That's funny. That's what that heights does to you. "I would not dare to have you get off just here, Mahela," answered Alessandro sorrowfully. "It is dreadful to me to see you suffer, so I will go very slowly indeed. It is safe. We all came up here, the whole band, for the sheep shearing, old Fernando on his horse all the way." "Really," said Ramona, taking comfort at each word. "I will try not to be so silly. Is it far, dearest Alessandro?" "Not much more as steep as this, dear, nor so narrow, but it will be an hour yet before we stop." But the worst was over for Ramona now, and long before they reached the bottom of the precipice, she was ready to laugh at her fears. Only as she looked back at the zigzag lines of the path over which she had come, little more than a brown thread, they seemed flung along the rock, she shuddered. Down in the bottom of the cañon, it was still the dusky gloaming when they arrived. Day came late to this fairy spot. Only at high noon did the sun fairly shine in. As Ramona looked around her, she uttered an exclamation of delight which satisfied Alessandro. Yes, he said, when I came here for the ferns, I wished to myself many times that you could see it. There is not in all this country so beautiful a place. This is our first home, Amahela, he added, in a tone almost solemn. And throwing his arms around her, he drew her to his breast with the first feeling of joy he had experienced. I wish we could live here always, cried Ramona. Would Mahala be content, said Alessandro. Very, she answered. He sighed. There will not be land enough to live here, he said. If there were, I too would like to stay here till I died, Mahela, and never see the face of a white man again. Already the instinct of the hunted and wounded animal to seek hiding was striving in Alessandro's blood. But there would be no food. We could not live here. Ramona's exclamation had set Alessandro to thinking, however. Would Mahela be content to stay here 3 days now? He asked. There is grass enough for the horses for that time. We should be very safe here, and I fear very much we should not be safe on any road. I think Mahela, the senora, will send men after Baba. Baba, cried Ramona, aghast at the idea. My own horse? She would not dare to call it stealing a horse, so take my own Baba. Oh, to take my own Baba. But even as she spoke, her heart misgave her. The senora would dare anything, would misrepresent anything. Only too well Ramona knew that the very mention of the phrase horse stealing meant all through the country. She looked piteously at Alessandro. He read her thoughts. So he's saying like she could say anything pretty much. So the senora could just say, yes, that is it, Mahela, he said. If she sent men after Baba, there is no knowing what they might do. It will not do any good for you to say he was yours. They would not believe you, and they might take me too if the senora had told them to and put me into the Ventura jail. She's just wicked enough to do it, cried Ramona. Let us not stir out of this spot, Alessandro, not for a week. Couldn't we stay a week? By that time she would have given over looking for us. I'm afraid not a week. There is not feed for the horses, and I do not know what we could eat. I have my gun, but there is not much now to kill. But I have brought meat and bread, Alessandro, said Ramona earnestly, and we could eat very little each day and make it last. She was like a child in her simplicity and eagerness. Every other thought was for the time being driven out of her mind by the terror of being pursued. Pursuit of her, she knew, would not be in the senora's plans, but the reclaiming of Baba and Captain, that was another thing. The more Ramona thought of it, the more it seemed to her a form of vengeance which would be likely to commend itself to the senora's mind. Felipe might possibly prevent it. It was he who had given Baba to her. He would feel that it would be shameful to recall or deny the gift. Only in Felipe lay Ramona's hope. If she had thought to tell Alessandro that in her farewell note to Felipe she had said that she supposed they were going to Father Salvidera, it would have saved both her and Alessandro much disquietude. Alessandro would have known that men pursuing them on that supposition would have gone straight down the river road to the sea and struck northward along the coast, but it did not occur to Ramona to mention this. In fact, she hardly recollected it after the first day. Alessandro had explained to her this plan, which was to go by way of Temecula to San Diego to be married there by Father Gasparra, the priest of that parish, and then go to the village of Pueblo of San Pascual, about 15 miles northwest of San Diego. A cousin of Alessandro was the head man of this village and had many times begged him to come there to live, but Alessandro had steadily refused, believing it to be his duty to remain at Temecula with his father. San Pascual was a regularly established pueblo founded by a number of the Indian neophytes of the San Luis Rey mission at the time of the breaking up of that mission. It was established by a decree of the governor of California, and the lands of the San Pascual Valley given to it. A paper recording this establishment and gifts, signed by the governor's own hand, was given to the Indian who was the first alcalde of the pueblo. He was Chief Pablo's brother. At his death, the authority passed into the hands of his son, Isidro, the cousin of whom Alessandro had spoken. Isidro has that paper still, Alessandro said, and he thinks it will keep them their village. Perhaps it will, but the Americans are beginning to come in at the head of the valley, and I do not believe, Mahela, there is any safety anywhere. Still, for a few years, we can perhaps stay there. There are nearly 200 Indians in the valley. It is much better than Temecula, and Isidro's people are much better off than ours were. They have splendid herds of cattle and horses and large wheat fields. Isidro's house stands under a great fig tree. They say it is the largest fig tree in the country. But Alessandro, cried Ramona, why do you think it is not safe there if Isidro has the paper? I thought a paper made it all right. I don't know, replied Alessandro. Perhaps it may be, but I have got the feeling now that nothing will be of any use against the Americans. I do believe they will mine the paper. I don't believe they will mine the paper. I don't know, replied Alessandro. Perhaps it may be, but I got the feeling now that nothing will be of any use against the Americans. I don't believe they will mine the paper. Okay, oh, I read it twice, right? They didn't mind the papers the senora had for all that land of hers they took away, said Ramona thoughtfully. But Felipe said that was because Pio Pico was a bad man and gave away lands he had no right to give away. They didn't mind the papers the senora had for all that land of hers they took away, said Ramona thoughtfully. But Felipe said that was because Pio Pico was a bad man and gave away lands he had no right to give away. So who says Pio Pico was a bad man? So Felipe said that. That's just it, said Alessandro. I live on the land Pio Pico had. Pico Rivera. That's just it, said Alessandro. Can't they say the same thing about any governor, especially if he has given lands to us? If the señorita couldn't keep hers with Señor Felipe to help her, and he knows all about the law and can speak the American language, what chance is there for us? We can't take care of ourselves any better than the wild beast can, my Mahela. Oh, why did you come with me? Why did I let you? After such words as these, Alessandro would throw himself on the ground, and for a few moments, not even Ramona's voice would make him look up. It was strange that the gentle girl, unused to hardship or to the thought of danger, did not find herself terrified by these fierce glooms and apprehensions of her lover, but she was appalled by nothing. Saved from the only thing in life she had dreaded, sure that Alessandro lived and that he would not leave her, she had no fears. This was partly from her inexperience, from her utter inability to conceive of the things Alessandro's imagination painted in colors only too true. But it was also largely due to the inalienable loyalty and quenchless courage of her soul, qualities in her nature never yet tested, qualities of which she hardly knew so much as the name, but which were to bear her steadfast and buoyant through many sorrowful years. Before nightfall of this, their first day in the wilderness, Alessandro had prepared for Ramona a bed of finely broken twigs of the manzanita and ceanothus, ceanothus, both of which grew in abundance all through the cañon. Manzanita is a beautiful color. It's a beautiful tree. Above these he spread layers of glossy ferns 5 and 6 feet long. When it was done, it was a couch no queen need have scorned. As Ramona seated herself on it, she exclaimed, now I shall see how it feels to lie and look up at the stars at night. Do you recollect, Alessandro, the night you put Felipe's bed on the veranda, when he told me how beautiful it was to lie at night outdoors or out of doors and look up at the stars? Indeed, did Alessandro remember that night, the first moment he had ever dared to dream of the Señorita Ramona as his own. Yes, I remember it, my Mahela, he answered slowly, and in a moment more added, that was the day Juan Can had told me that your mother was of my people, and that was the night I first dared in my thoughts to say that perhaps you might someday love me. But where are you going to sleep, Alessandro, said Ramona, seeing that he spread no more boughs. You have made yourself no bed. Alessandro laughed. I need no bed, he said. We think it's on our mother's laps we lie when we lie on the ground. It is not hard, Mahela. It is soft, and rests one better than beds. But tonight I shall not sleep. I will sit by this tree and watch. Why, what are you afraid of? Asked Ramona. It may grow so cold that I must make a fire for Mahela, he answered. It sometimes gets very cold before morning in these cañons, so I shall feel safer to watch tonight. This he said not to alarm Ramona. His real reason for watching was that he had seen on the edge of the stream tracks which gave him uneasiness. They were faint and evidently old, but they looked like the tracks of a mountain lion. As soon as it was dark enough to prevent curl of smoke from being seen from below, he would light a fire and keep it blazing all night and watch, gun in hand, lest the beast return. But you will be dead, Alessandro, if you do not sleep. You are not strong, said Ramona anxiously. I am strong now, Mahela, answered Alessandro, and indeed he did already look like a renewed man in spite of all his fatigue and anxiety. I'm no longer weak, and tomorrow I will sleep and you shall watch. Will you lie on the fern bed then? Asked Ramona gleefully. I would like the ground better, said honest Alessandro. Ramona looked disappointed. That is very strange, she said. It is not so soft, this bed of boughs, that one need fear to be made tender by lying on it, she continued, throwing herself down. But oh, how sweet it smells. It's crazy that she says that. You don't gotta be so tough. It's not like you're sleeping on a mattress, you know? It's not gonna take away from you laying down your guard, you know? Yes, this kind of reminds me of myself in a sense. Kind of how I'd rather have it tough, you know, living in my car until I could get my own, you know. Um, so she said, she continued throwing herself down, but oh, how sweet it smells. Yes, there is spice wood in it, he answered. I put it at the head for my Hala's pillow. Ramona's Ramona was very tired and she was happy. All night long she slept like a child. She did not hear Alessandro's steps. She did not hear the crackling of the fire he lighted. She did not hear the barking of the captain, who more than once, in spite of all Alessandro could do to quiet him, made the cañon echo with sharp, quick notes of warning as he heard the stealthy steps of wild creatures in the chaparral. Hours after hours she slept on, and hour after hour Alessandro sat leaning against a huge sycamore trunk and watched her. As a fitful firelight played over her face, he thought he had never seen it so beautiful. Its expression of calm repose insensibly soothed and strengthened him. She looked like a saint, he thought. Perhaps it was a saint of help and guidance. The Virgin was sending her to him and his people. The darkness deepened, became blackness. Only the red gleams from the fire broke it in swaying rifts as the wind makes rifts in black storm clouds in the heavens. With the darkness, the stillness also deepened. Nothing broke that, except an occasional motion of Baba or the pony, or an alert signal from Captain. Then all seemed stiller than ever. Alessandro felt as if God himself were in the cañon. Countless times in his life before he had lain in lonely places under the sky and watched the night through, but he never felt like this. It was ecstasy, and yet it was pain. What was to come on the morrow, and the next morrow, and the next, and the next, all through the coming years? What was to come to this beloved and loving woman who lay there sleeping so confident, so trustful, guarded only by him, Alessandro, the exile, fugitive, homeless man? Before the dawn, wood doves began their calling. The cañon was full of them. No two notes quite alike. It seemed to Alessandro, sharp in sense, pair after pair. He fancied that he recognized, speaking and replying, as did the pair whose voices had so comforted him the night he watched under the geranium hedge by the Moreno Chapel. Love, here. Love, here. They comforted him still more now. They too have only each other, he thought as he bent his eyes lovingly on Ramona's face. I remember him saying that in the book a couple chapters back about that's what the wood doves were saying. One would say love, the other would respond, I'm here. It was dawn and past dawn on the plains before it was yet morning twilight in the cañon, but the birds in the upper boughs of the sycamores caught the tokens of the coming day and began to twitter in the dusk. Their notes fell on Ramona's sleeping ear like the familiar sound of the linnets in the veranda thatch at home, and waked her instantly. Sitting up bewildered and looking about her, she exclaimed, "Oh, is it morning already, and so dark? The birds can see more sky than we. Sing, Alessandro," and she began the hymn. Singers at dawn from the heavens above, people all the regions gladly were to sing. Never went up truer invocation from sweeter spot. Sing not so loud, my Mahel, whispered Alessandro as her voice went caroling like a lark's in the pure ether. There might be hunters near who would hear, and he joined in with a low and muffled tone. As she dropped her voice at this caution, it seemed even sweeter than before. Come, O sinners, come, and we will sing tender hymns to our refuge. Ah, Mahela, there is no sinner here except me, said Alessandro. My Mahela is like one of the Virgin's own saints, and indeed might have been forgiven the thought. As he gazed at Ramona sitting there in the shimmering light, her face thrown out into relief by the gray wall of fern-draped rock behind her, her splendid hair unbound, falling in tangled masses to her waist, her cheeks flushed, her face radiant with devout and fervent supplication, her eyes uplifted to the narrow belt of sky overhead, where filmy vapors were turning to gold, touched by a sun she could not see. Hush, my love, she breathed rather than said. That would be a sin if you really thought it. Oh, beautiful queen, princess of heaven. She continued repeating the first lines of the song, and then, sinking on her knees, reached out one hand for Alessandro's and glided, almost without a break in the melodious sound, into a low recitative of the morning prayers, like recite. Her rosary was of fine chased gold beads with an ivory crucifix, a rare and precious relic of the mission's olden times. Had belonged to Father Peyri himself, was given by him to Father Salvadera, and by Father Salvadera to the blessed child. Ramona, at her confirmation, So it was a gift at her confirmation. A warmer token of his love and trust he could not have bestowed upon her. Into Ramona's religious and affectionate heart, it had always seemed a bond and an assurance, not only of the Father Salvador's love, but of the love and protection of the now sainted Peri. Rest in peace. As she pronounced the last words of her trusting prayer and slipped the last of the golden beads along on his string, a thread of sunlight shot into the cañon through a deep, narrow gap in its rocky eastern crest. Shot in for a second, no more, fell aslant the rosary, lighted it by a flash as okay, so let me go back. As she pronounced the last words of her trusting prayer and slipped the last of the golden beads along on its string, a thread of sunlight shot into the cañon through a deep, narrow gap in its rocky eastern crest. Shot in for a second, no more, fell aslant the rosary, lighted it by a flash, as if a fire across the fine-cut facets of the beads. On Ramona's hands and on the white face of the ivory Christ, only a flash and it was gone. To both Ramona and Alessandro, it came like an omen. So the sunlight, like a message straight from the Virgin. Could she choose better messenger? Okay, wait. Could she choose better messenger? She, the compassionate one, the loving woman in heaven, mother of the Christ to whom they prayed. Through her, mother, for whose sake he would regard their least cry. Could she choose better messenger or swifter than the sunbeam to say that she heard and would help them in these sore straits? Perhaps there were not in the whole great world at that moment to be found two souls who were experiencing so vivid a happiness as thrilled the veins of these two friendless ones on their knees alone in the wilderness, gazing half awe-stricken at the shining rosary. So she started praying, and then the sun shined on the rosary and, reflected a really bright gleaming light, and they're taking it as a symbol from the power of the sun, from the power of the Creator who created the sun, who shines light on us every day for us to be able to see. And they're taking it as a sign and a symbol. And I want to say a little testimony. One of the times that I was most at my lowest, and I felt the most fear, and I felt the most evil presence among me, when I was alone, had nobody to run to or feel comforted by. I was sitting in a room. It was on a second-story building. And I used to remove the screen so the smoke, when I smoked in that room, I'd be able to blow it out. I was young. I was probably maybe 22. And at this time of my life, I was really in an emotional state, I would say. And I was really an emotional mind frame. And I believe I smoked, and I had gotten a lot of fear. And there was this connection to me saying, just jump out of the building. Something was, the lowest point in me, the hopelessness, or I don't know, it really felt like something was trying to control my mind, was telling me, jump out the window. And I started hyperventilating, like I was like not trying to look at the window, but I was sitting at the edge of my bed with my feet on the ground and my hands on my knees, breathing heavy, and somebody kept saying, come on, just jump out the window. I looked up. I was like scared to look at the window, and I got to the point where it was really hard for me to breathe. Somebody said, go outside. I opened my door. I went outside. I went to the backyard. I looked at a faucet. I threw water on my face. I sat back with my legs flat on the ground, with my butt flat on the ground, with my arms behind me holding me up, with my face like with water on it. And I look at the sun, and the sun shined brighter, and a gust of wind blew at me, and I felt like I could breathe again. I felt like, and at that point, the immediate thought that I had was, you're okay, you're fine. I went outside, put my hands behind my back, hyperventilating. After I threw water on my face, I literally threw myself on the ground because I was just over it, over the fear, over it. And I still have many battles. That's 10 years ago, and 9 years ago, and I remember, like I said, the sun shined on me. It shined. And a gust of wind came. And I remember that feeling, because if you ever threw water on your face and felt the wind, you could feel it. When you lick your finger, that's how you feel it. The coolness, the coolness of the moisture, just blew at me, and I felt like it was one of the few that was one spiritual thing where I really felt my lowest alone. I've had other fears amongst other humans, you know, but it's crazy, right? So I believe in that. I believe it's a crazy little story that she puts in here. You know, that crazy part, they talk about Jesus and things of that nature. Because like I said, they're Mexican. Like, so what does that mean? Like, you already had that Spanish influence, so you were already kind of indoctrinated in a sense. So I don't know. I don't think Alessandro, being an Indian of that land, who never had somebody come and ever teach him about a God, believes in that particular God, but does believe in the power of the sun, to respect the sun, respect the moon, respect the animals of this earth, respect people, you know, respect the healing power of your body, respect the ointments that the world gives, you know, respect the signs that the world gives, you know. In this book it says that the birds led them to certain things, you know. And like even now when I work out at night, I can hear the bats at night. And every time I come, I hear them start saying, I mean, I felt like I've spoken to the crows when on my hiking trail, you know. I felt like I've spoken to the blue jays, the birds, you know. Trust me, if you ever stopped in front of a tree and try to whistle or just try to communicate, if you ever stopped and looked at the birds and just looked at them, not trying to scare them or nothing, they're just like you. They notice people looking at them. They start getting shy and start getting like, what's going on? Why are they looking at me? You know? You notice we're no different, you know? So I'm glad I shared that testimony with you guys. I guess you're fortunate enough to hear that testimony, you know. And at the time, I guess I correlated that. I did think Jesus, because that's the guy that I know. I thanked him, you know. And ultimately do think that there's a good in this world. There's a good spirit in this world that's here to help us. And I think there is a bad one that's also here to destroy us. So that guy makes me think of I'm looking over there. For some reason, look at I don't know if he's even alive over there in the car. I'm not sure if he's even ate today. But anyway, take care.